10.
Broadcasting across the state of Wisconsin on the Civic Media Radio Network and around the world on the Civic Media app. This is the Dom Salvia Show. And now, here's your host, Dom Salvia.
And welcome to the Dom Salvia Show. Happy Friday to us all. The first Friday of 2025. Thank you for sharing it with us. You can join us 855-752-4842. Jess PS on the board. And Jazz does hell to reintroduce our favorite Friday guest host today, James Santelle, former U.S. attorney, host of Amicus, a law review broadcasting right here on the Civic Media Radio Network on Saturdays, 9 to 11 a.m. Happy Friday, Jim. Happy New Year, man.
Once again, Happy New Year. Happy Friday. Good to be with you. And just once again, things happening in the state of the world, are they not?
Can you believe it?
Goodness, right?
A lot to get to today. Certainly the breaking news, Speaker Johnson reelected after a couple of the holdouts. They kept the vote open. There were 3 that voted against him. Or for somebody else, but
we have to go out in the hallway. We have to talk to people, right?
Right.
This is like being back in grade school,
it was.
right?
It's funny you said that. I kind of remember being sent out to the hallway.
You and me both. Jim, let's talk outside for a few moments. Then we'll get this all straightened out. In fact, apparently it works in the United States Congress, too.
And, yeah, it worked on 2 of them. Massey, the holdout, that was a guy who said he would have to pull his fingernails out for him to vote for Johnson. So Johnson reelected, and I thought it was 2 votes, but no. The 3 voted against him. Then they held the vote open.
Right.
So they could be cajoled to vote for Johnson, and then he ultimately won it on the, I guess, technically first vote.
Even that. Well, apparently, some discretion in the incoming speaker just to hold things open while he gets the necessary votes. In other trappings of our lives, there are rules about that, right? And we vote, and then it comes to a conclusion, but apparently not in the United States Congress. The good news, I suppose, is that we do have a government now that, at least in that branch of government, can operate. And people can be appointed to committees. And, we can do this little thing next week called counting electoral votes, which, again, a week ago, you and I were bemoaning the fact that maybe we wouldn't be able to do that if we didn't have a government. So that's good news. That's good news, I suppose.
We should go to D.C. It will be wild, I heard.
Right, exactly. We've got some envelopes to open next week, and presumably... Well, we don't know if that will go well, but we've got the 6th of January coming up here, and we'll see what happens then. Presumably, both the present president of the Senate, her name is Vice President Kamala Harris, and the newly elected Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mike Johnson, opening those votes and counting them and declaring the President of the United States of America as Donald Trump. He doesn't get sworn in until the 20th, of course, but we've got a few days to work on things.
And before he gets sworn in, he will be
sentenced.
Okay, hold on that.
Right,
hold on that. Let's stick to the headlines right now with regards to Johnson. We have a little bit of sound of the day. Just P.S. doing the hard work. Thank you for that. Matt Gaetz not going to serve in the 119th Congress. Apparently, the House pretty happy about that. Just let's play cut number 1.
The clerk is in receipt of a letter from the Honorable Matt Gaetz of the state of Florida, indicating that he will not serve in the House in the 119th Congress. Without objection, the letters relating to his resignation will be printed in the record.
Objection.
Without objection. No objections here.
Right. And thank goodness this is part of the record so that when we write our PhD stories on all this down the road, we've got clarity on the fact that Matt Gaetz, not a part of government going forward, probably should have been prosecuted in the state system, a federal system, but he gets on with his life outside of the Congress.
And, at least we did get the House Ethics Report.
Yes,
it was a fight over whether or not we would ever see that, and it has come to light, and you can definitely see why Gaetz and, the people who wanted him to serve as Attorney General did not want that coming to light.
And the notion, once again, that this man came within some votes of becoming the chief federal law enforcement officer of the United States of America in 2025. Our incoming president wanted him to serve in that capacity and was advocating for that for a long
Does it
period
make
of time.
you question the judgment of
It
the
does.
incoming
It
president,
does.
Jim?
Although that's not
Question?
that is not the particular event that prompts me questioning, but it's one of them. We'll put that on the list.
We got a couple from the highlights today. Once again, Speaker Johnson reelected. And I was on earlier today, Matt and I are on air with Jane and Greg and Calvin on the board, and we were talking about this obviously before the vote came down. And one of my observations was, I wonder how this will reflect on Trump. He was out there last week pushing it. He sent another tweet out and message out this morning, telling people, "Hey, Mike's the guy. Mike's the guy.
He's my guy."
And I got to say, I think, it worked. The GOP coalesced at least this time. And maybe it was a shot across the bow with these first two, not going along with it, didn't have the votes initially, and then they kept the vote open. Then they eventually, flipped over. Massey did not. But I guess I would consider this a victory for Donald Trump and his effort to keep the megas together.
A victory with a very small v. This is what counts for a victory now, Dom,
right.
in 2025. That if the normal thing that happens that should happen when you've got a majority party in the House of Representatives, in the Senate side, apparently things under Kamala Harris' direction went routinely today as she swore people in. But this now counts for a victory when the Republican Party, they're now in power, can get it together sufficiently to elect a Speaker of the House of Representatives. Oh, happy day.
Oh, happy
and good that happens
The
once
lights are
again.
on.
Right?
Congratulations.
Exactly, right? The really terrible thing did not happen. Let's celebrate that. And that's the level of victory that Donald Trump should be
bar's
celebrating.
certainly been lowered, Jim.
It is quite low.
The narrowest margin for a House in almost 100 years.
Mm-hmm. Right. And
Since 1930, man.
Right. And we know going forward, too, that we're not out of the woods completely, right? Because as we talked last week, and well, as does Jess, we've got other people who are leaving the Congress to take positions inside this new administration.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to change things. We're going to have variables in the numbers here to get legislation passed, to do other things. And so Mike Johnson has no small task in front of him. The one good thing is that this prior rule that sunk the previous speaker has now been expanded to 9 members of the House of Representatives have to come forward and say we no longer have confidence. Used to be just one could stand up,
No,
right?
and they all
Historically,
have to be of
The
the
Republican
majority
Party.
party.
Yes, right,
Come on,
right,
man.
right.
My understanding, though, Jim, that was normally historically the case.
Exactly, right?
That was
We're-
one from
right,
either party could
right.
step up and do that and push that.
Exactly. Again, we didn't have to think about these things when we had some sense of commitment to a party, but now we've got Mike Johnson's got a little bit more space, but he's also taking out of today's event the fact that, again, we suspend the vote. We do have to go talk to at least 2 more people. There were others among that group beyond who voted for him in that first vote who plainly had expressed concern. There are about 7, 8, 9 of them altogether who, even going into that this afternoon, said, well, I'm not quite certain. Some deciding as late as today. He's got some issues down the road. And again, this razor-thin majority that he has does not guarantee him the capacity to do everything that he and, yes, Donald Trump want to do. Among other things, we've got that debt ceiling thing out there.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Janet Yellen, who's the Treasury Secretary, writing to him saying, you know what, you got to take care of this because if not, we've got some real crisis. She says she can do a few things administratively to, again, keep the lights on. But he's got
Not
to
like doing a little check kiting on the government level.
right. But he's got some other challenges out there, and he plainly has a party. Again, if he had even 10, 15, 20 members of a balance there, he doesn't. And it'll be interesting to see. The other challenge out there, of course, is for the Democrats, too. At what point do they want to not rescue him, but assist in getting government moving to keep the debt ceiling perhaps where it should be, to keep government afloat? We've got to address that issue again in early 25. At what point do the Democrats say, okay, will lean over and will support the
Depends what
speaker.
the deal is, man.
Exactly,
you know what I
right?
mean?
Right?
They're going to need the Dems on the debt ceiling. There's no question about it, because some of those Republicans are not going to. Thomas Massey's certainly not going to. Chip Roy, some others have expressed some concern about that as well. So we assume they're going to lose some of those. Well, you lose 3, 4, 5 people. Next thing you don't have the votes. You can't get it done. So that means you got to reach out to Hakeem Jeffries and that crew, and then okay, that's great. We all want to do this, but what are you going to give us for that?
Exactly. And what consideration can we have substantively? It's not just a matter of playing games on Capitol Hill. What things can we anticipate that you will at least get out of committee, for example, and put these things to a vote? Obviously, Republicans have the capacity, as they do now in the Senate, to keep things from even coming to the floor of the House or the Senate. Maybe those are the kinds of things that Hakeem Jeffries and his leadership group should say, we need votes on these. We want
leverage that.
Exactly. Yeah. Precisely. And let's tell the American people what it is that the full House of Representatives feels about these very important issues. Again, their education, their environment, their commerce, their agriculture, all those kinds of things.
Oh, a bunch of woke topics. Come on, we don't need any of that DEI. We got a little bit more sound. Mike Johnson, victorious today. Cut number 2, please.
We best serve our own country and most successfully discharge our obligations to humanity by continuing to be openly and candidly, intensely and scrupulously American. I love that. I love that. Today, yeah, that's right. That's an applause line.
We're all Americans.
Please clap. What is it? Pause for applause. I'm surprised you didn't read that on the
I
prompter.
turned up the volume on that sound that he heard from the audience. That wasn't a clap. It was a cough.
But coughing to the notion that, yes, again, here's the low bar. The low bar, coughing in support, presumably, of the fact that what? We're all Americans. Gosh, when I woke up this morning, I wasn't quite certain of that, but we needed to have the speaker affirm that for
we
us.
have just a little bit more time in this segment. Let's sneak in the first cut from Hakeem Jeffries. Love this one. Cut number 3, please, Jess.
2 months ago, the American people elected Donald Trump as the 47th president of the United States of America. Thank you for that very generous applause. It's okay. There are no election deniers on our side of the aisle.
Talking to you, Cam. 855-752-4842. Hakeem Jeffries getting in a little dig, and it's duly noted. You know, the statistics I've seen from the reporting of the percentage of Republicans who think this was a great and fair election. It's amazing when your guy wins how great you think the election was, and although not to the same degree, Democrats feeling a little down,
absolutely,
compared to the last election.
Let's count the number of times the Democratic Party and Democrats have run into courts, federal and state, and asked to be considered for a review of this past election.
Just need you to find me 11,789 votes, Jim.
Right.
One more than we need. That's okay, right? That's okay.
We're just not doing that. The
Apparently
Democrats
we're not
are not
doing it
that.
right.
Right, exactly.
Or are we?
Again, when your guy loses, we go that route. When he or they win, everything is legitimate.
We are all winners when James Santelle joins us. You can join us today as well. Happy Friday, 855-752-4842. show, 855-752-4842, 855-75-CIVIC. Got Just PS on the board. James Santelle, former U.S. Attorney, host of Amicus, a law review, joining me at the table today. And you can do so on the lines or on the text. It's the same number. Be patient. We will get to you a little more from the breaking news today. Speaker Johnson remains Speaker Johnson. A little bit of drama. 3 Republicans pushed back. 2 of them were eventually cajoled after a pause in the vote. And they came around to vote for Speaker Johnson. A victory for him, certainly for Trump and the mega agenda. We've got some of the sound. Hakeem Jeffries. No election deniers on our side of the aisle. And Scam, I see you. Quote, it's literally not election denying. It's factual information. The numbers are not possible. It's like screaming fire and you're in a school for the gifted deaf. Come on, Cam. Besides, if there were to be something along those lines, I would expect it be coming from other people besides you, Cam. You know, like the Democratic Party or those who actually would have standing or concerns about the fact that some folks think this election was stolen by Trump this time. But I digress. Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader in the House, speaking today as well. We talked about the no election deniers, bipartisanship. Let's hear about that. You know, Steve Bannon wants hyperpartisanship. We'll see what happens. Here's Hakeem, cut number 4, please, Jess.
House Democrats will work hard to find bipartisan common ground with our Republican colleagues and the incoming administration on any issue, whenever and wherever possible, in order to make life better for everyday Americans.
And I appreciate that. You know, there are going to be, and there'll be pushback on things that the Democrats do as well. Hey, why are you teaming up with those megas? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that?
Right.
Because ultimately, we need governance. We need need to continue to move government. We cannot have stagnation in our government. And if there are opportunities, certainly as a leader and the Dems as a body should work when they can with the Republicans.
It's that C word, right? It's called compromise, and it's not a nasty word. It's not a negative word. It's how legislation gets done. Remember when Obamacare was passed? The president was holding out for Republicans to join in masse. They said they sort of would. They didn't. He was trying to compromise. In the end, kind of took away portions of his own legislation, anticipating that happening.
And they didn't.
But nonetheless, that's the way government works. You don't always get everything you want to going in. I often say in the context of legal settlements and courtroom things, if everybody leaves the room and you're a little bit unhappy, you didn't get everything you want, you probably have a good settlement. And you've got a good, strong basis for going ahead and implementing whatever it is you just negotiated. If everybody leaves a little bit unhappy, you're okay.
Then you're okay. That's kind of a bummer way to do it, but okay.
Yeah.
But it is. That's what compromise is. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Finally, Hakeem Jeffries, cut number 5, please, Jess.
We will fight hard to make sure that no one in this town takes away Social Security or Medicare from the American people. Not now, not ever. No means never.
Right.
And there you've got the minority leader there saying there are red lines, right? Compromise, you can do a lot of things in that area, but there are some things we cannot countenance. And Speaker Johnson and members of the slightly majority party right now know that there are some things that the American people are going to insist on not compromising on. Those are a couple of them.
And we did hear today as well, I believe it was Speaker Johnson talking about, moving quickly to extend the Trump tax cuts.
Yes.
Well,
right.
And we've heard some rumblings before of, the Doge and other folks say, well, we got to, cut spending by $2.5 trillion. Well, where's that coming from? You know what I'm saying? So we'll see how this all pans out. It's kind of, I don't know, it's a nice contradictory statement. Hey, we'll be bipartisan and supportive when we can, but you're not touching Social Security or Medicare.
It's clear. Again, one of the things that we will anticipate seeing, it's all about money, right? It's all about dollars and it's math. You simply can't do all of this. And again, you've got to, in the end, keep the government operational at some levels because the government does do an awful lot of good things out there for people and supports an awful lot of Americans. But you've got to do it based upon the numbers. And if they're not there, you just can't keep going forward in the way that you might otherwise want to do.
Well, the numbers and the votes.
Yes,
855-752-4842. CJ, Happy Friday, CJ. Happy New Year. Welcome. What do you got for us?
Well, thank you for taking my call, gentlemen. We do have to do something about our fiscal responsibility, because if we don't do something to modify Social Security or the standards, what it takes to get, it's going to be in the red in no time. And it'll be mandatory that benefits will either be cut or people won't receive it. So the mere fact that posturing, you can't do anything about it. It's like Obamacare. They wouldn't let insurance companies compete across state lines. That was one thing Republicans asked for. Competition is good. Most small businesses and a lot of individuals file taxes as class corporations. I'm sure Civic Radio does the same thing. They need those tax cuts to expand their businesses.
Come on, man. Listen, hang on. Number one. Hang on. I get what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. But let's talk about there's two sides of the equation, right? There's the revenue side and there's the expense side. Right now, when you earn your income and you're taxed on your Social Security, there's a cap on that. One of the ways we could help fund Social Security and meet the obligations, raise that cap, lift that cap. Why should there be a cap whatsoever? Why should Elon Musk be able to pay his entirety of his Social Security amounts in like 14 seconds of 2025?
It was 60 seconds.
60 seconds. Okay, sorry. You know what I'm saying? Why cap that, man? Well, I mean, shouldn't they be contributing as well? CJ's out. We don't know CJ. Hang on. Oh, go ahead, CJ.
Third solution. But saying you're not going to do anything, someone's going to have to pay more. Or
yeah, that's exactly
right. Yes. Precisely right.
Thank you,
right.
Thank you, CJ.
Exactly, and to sacrifice those interests on the altar of huge tax breaks of the sort we saw late in 2017, and premising future tax breaks upon the notion that we've got to cut those entitlement programs that are out there that have been around again for many, many years. That's the problem. That's the problem right there. You're balancing one against the other, and you're basically siding in favor of the oligarchs and the people who can pay against the people who are getting these benefits.
They may have the money, but they only got one vote. There's a lot more of us. Come back with us, 855-752-4842. Was Merrick Garland the worst AG in history? We'll ask James Santelle. first Friday of 2025. Thank you for spending it with us. James Santelle, former U.S. Attorney, host of Amicus, a law review, right here on the Civic Media Radio Network. Saturdays, that's tomorrow, 9 to 11 a.m. Just PS on the board. You can be part as well, 855-75-CIVIC. We're going to get to Trump, but before we get into the weeds on the sentencing that's supposed to occur from Judge Merchan, let's step back a minute, Jim, if we may, and look, maybe from 30,000 feet. I was reflecting on this yesterday as we're thinking about what we're going to talk about today. I'm like, man, this Merrick Garland is terrible. He was terrible, man. He sat on his hands for years. It's hard to imagine a worse attorney general. And I'm looking at, like, Bill Barr, man. He got out in front of the Mueller report, man. He covered up for, like, Reagan or Bush. Or
issuing statements that are plainly wrong about what the Mueller report showed. But to your point,
the lack of action, is that worse
than
going out and specifically lying about what these investigations have found? I'm not sure that that's much different, man. Really.
There's that old Edmund Burke's statement, right? That all you know, for evil to succeed is for good men to do nothing. And so, speaking again about the Mueller report, you've got Bill Barr, yes, misrepresenting wildly what it said and what did not say. Remember that all of those obstruction of justice incidents that Bob Mueller identified in that report. We talked about this on the air years ago, ad nauseum, perhaps.
Obstruction of justice
in connection with the very investigation of Russia, of 2016.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
So he finds
Trump's
in the end actions in themselves
in that investigation,
absolutely,
were obstructing justice.
Firing Jim Comey, telling his counsel not to report on certain things, telling them to remake documents, those kinds of things. Don McGahn, remember that name, his counsel. All kinds of things, editing public statements about what he did and did not do. Bob Mueller identifies 10 of those. And again, not all of them would have been the subject of prosecutions. I think at the time we talked, maybe 6, 8, depending upon some discretionary exercises. But all of those happened when 2016, and most importantly, in 2017, the first months of the first term of Donald Trump in the office. Okay?
So when they were doing the investigation into what if, how Russia, what they did, Trump was gumming up the works.
Absolutely, right? And again, Bob Mueller says in the end, he says, I can't prosecute. Why? Because he's a sitting president, so he hands this to Nancy Pelosi. Again, we celebrated her return to the Congress today, and that's a good thing. But frankly, Nancy Pelosi also made the determination early on that there was nothing about that. The American people, she said, are not ready to impeach a president. So we gave him a pass there. But what did happen? To your subject matter here about Merrick Garland, you take 2017, you add 5 years to it. I'm not good at math.
Why are we adding 5 years?
We're adding 5 years to it because that's a statute of limitations, right? For a federal prosecution for obstruction of justice. You could maybe go on broader concepts if you re-describe this, but basically 5 years, okay? So you take 2017, you add 5 years to that, and Jess, who's the good scientist among us, and the mathematician, she will tell me that gets you into the spring of 2022. Who is the Attorney General in the spring of 2022? Well, that's Merrick Garland. And so although we don't know about it, at some point we know that we will identify that there are memorandums inside the Department of Justice about what we do. Do we basically go ahead and now prosecute someone who is no longer a sitting president? The policy against that no longer applies. What should we do, Mr. Attorney General? And I have no doubt, I don't know, I have not seen any documents. There were discussions about this, memorandums about this, and in the end, sometime in 2022, the statute of limitations lapsed. And that happened on Merrick Garland's watch. And what that means is that Donald Trump not only impeached, not impeached on that, but also for prosecution purposes, those obstruction counts, those obstruction instances, unmistakable, clear, they're footnoted. You could have tried the case out of that report itself.
Just out of the report.
Out of the report. It tells you who says what, who to call, what documents support all that. Merrick Garland decided not to prosecute Donald Trump. And why is that significant? Well, number one, it means that he gets away with obstruction. But I would argue no less important is the D word once again, and that is deterrence, right? When Donald Trump is not impeached, He, number one, understands that, hey, I can run roughshod over the Congress. And then even as a private citizen, ultimately, when he loses in 2020, what he knows is that this Department of Justice is not going to prosecute him either. And that gives you a sense of confidence in going ahead. It gives you the capacity, even while you are the president, planning to do these other things that do prompt impeachments. You take the documents out of the White House because you think, you know what, nobody's ever going to go after me. All of that, the timing again has to be straightened out. But all of that sending the message that law enforcement, and in particular the Department of Justice, from my perspective, did not do what it should have done at that time to deter this man from engaging in obstruction of justice. Many other defendants out there in America to this day, the subject of criminal indictments for obstruction charges, a whole less serious and dramatic than this. Donald Trump got away with that on this Attorney General's watch.
When investigations are going on and people are actively trying to, keep the information from coming out,
right?
That makes the crime even worse, right? I mean, that's the whole point of the obstruction of justice.
It does. And you can, again, go back to another president. His name is Richard Nixon, right? You can make an argument that Richard Nixon may not have been involved, actually, with the plumbers, if you will, initially. But what does he do? Rather than saying, my gosh, I've just discovered, John Dean just came to me and told me about all these things that cancer in the presidency. I am flabbergasted by this. I was not involved in this, and hang those people out to dry, right? Instead, what he does is he engages in stonewalling. That's where the phrase comes from, right? And John Mitchell gets involved. You obstruct justice. That's the reason why ultimately, again, back in the early 1970s, Richard Nixon was compelled to leave the White House because he engaged in conduct that's violative of the law of the federal criminal code, right?
You can't do too that. Weak, man. He should have fought back, man. He should have, if he did what Trump continues to do, we would have a different history right now.
Absolutely. And again, it's this important notion of deterrence. And that's what I find especially troubling with this 10 years. It's not just a deterrence.
It's the multi-levels of different justice, quote unquote. If it was me, sitting around trying to stick it to the man for investigating me, they come down on me like a ton of bricks.
If you went to witnesses and said, you know what, I need a favor from you. I need you to tell the police and law enforcement, other than what's right, take this document, and I need to have you doctor this and change that. I need to have you tell the American people, or even just law enforcement, even people in our community, that something is true when in fact it's not, as a part of an attempt to push back on, and oh, by the way, I'm going to try to fire the very person, and I'm going to be successful in firing the very person who is investigating me. All of that obstruction of justice, Donald Trump got away with that.
So what is that? Then I guess the question is, a guy like Bill Barr, who helped cover it up,
right,
versus a guy like Merrick Garland, who didn't go after it when it was plain as day. Is one of those worse than the other? Because the effect, Jim, is exactly the same.
The effect is the same. And again, all these things, this is not in any way to defend a decision not to do it in circumstances where it's so compelling. We've got the report on this. There is prosecutorial discretion. You make that decision all the time when you've got witnesses who maybe are not as strong as they otherwise would be, but the documents are not as clear. We just don't think you're going to be able to convince a jury. Here in this instance, I don't know that any of that is true. And so one day when these documents inside the Department of Justice are released, when you and I are still getting together with Jess on a Friday afternoon and talking about all this, it'd be fascinating to see what those memorandums say about the decision not to go ahead in 2021 and 2022 to prosecute, again, a person who is no longer in the presidency. That policy against not prosecuting a sitting president no longer applies. What is the reason for not going ahead on even 3, 4, 5 of those counts and going after an obstructive behavior?
Yeah, pick the top 2 or 3.
Right,
I mean, the guarantees, the one, because you don't need to win on all of them.
Right.
Just get the point across.
It would have been a huge trial, right? If because he's engaging in so many different things, you can pick and choose. You can make a discretionary decision. And some of those, Bob Mueller even acknowledges sort of in his testimony, which wasn't great. You may recall in front of the Congress, that some of them are more compelling than others. But he listed them all. But why? Because he wanted to be clear on what happened here. And we can give prosecutors inside the Department of Justice who are looking at all this a great deal of discretionary authority to pick and choose, but some of those should have been selected. And that's how we began this administration again. And I know we want to talk more about the delay in investigating January 6th. We waited a year. We got the attention finally of internal prosecutors in the Department of Justice only after people who yesterday were getting the Presidential Medal of Freedom by the current president for initiating this, right? And for identifying in the public domain that, hey, this wasn't just 1,200 or thousands of people who were assaulting our Capitol, but maybe, in fact, it was larger than that. And we were waiting somehow to move up the chain as we do in drug cases. Instead of saying, you know what, Donald Trump was saying those things on the ellipse on January 6th and saying, let's go down there. Let's do this. Take back your government. Doesn't that prompt you to say, you know what, let's at least open a file to determine whether or not there are higher level people who may have been involved in inciting this insurrection, who are responsible for doing that? You open that virtually, I'll give them a week or so, right?
Man, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? How in the hell does it take a year, man? We were watching that live.
Right.
I mean, it was obvious what was happening, and a lot of those folks, the foot soldiers, or the ones that got caught up in it, you know, they're paying the price, and maybe they'll get their sentence commuted, or they'll get pardons from Trump as he has promised to do, and that would put a lot of violent people back out on the streets. The Law and Order Party will have that conversation if and when.
Exactly.
What are you talking about? It's very evident. The Wilbur Hotel, these things are known.
Right. That meeting there at the hotel, blocks from the White House there, and all of these people, again, the 1,300 prosecutors and many more out there who may in fact be the subject of pardons, also saying, why was I there? I was there in part because my president called me to come there. I was there because I was hearing all these things on social media. I'm not saying that's a predicate in and of itself to seek an indictment from the grand jury, but it's a predicate for opening the file and doing that investigative work even while the House committee is being constituted and going ahead. He waited a year. And what happens in the end, and it gets to the third big piece of this, of course, is you ran out of time. Right? You prosecuted, and Donald Trump's attorneys did a terrific job in the end of delaying this dramatically.
Yes. I mean, we certainly understand the strategy from Donald Trump and his attorneys.
Absolutely.
Delay. We get all that. And, you know, and obstruct if you can, because they're not going to come after you. Who gives a damn, right?
Get the Supreme Court to say some things it hasn't said in 238 years about the capacity of a president to commit crimes. That's a pretty big push in the direction,
push.
Right?
And even that, to some degree, that decision from the Supreme Court may not have gotten there had he jumped on this thing earlier.
Absolutely. Right. And you make those arguments. You had two great opinions from Tanya Chutkan from the Court of Appeals, again, that should have happened a year before they happened here. And again, not to say that they would not have gone to the Supreme Court, but a different time and a different place. Yeah. We're not yet on the verge of a new campaign here. We didn't know what Donald Trump was going to do yet. Maybe there would have been some dynamics there in the Supreme Court that would have tempered a little bit of that decision. And in the end, again, as we have spoken about, and this is my other soapbox piece of this, the Attorney General, I believe it was the Attorney General and not Jack Smith, who said, you know what, let's anticipate what Donald Trump will do, which is also in violation of fundamental norms about justice. Let's dismiss these cases. Let's do it on our watch. On our watch, when we believe in the legitimacy of these cases, the Mar-a-Lago case, we believe in the legitimacy of that insurrection case, because not only because a grand jury said so, but the evidence suggests that dramatically. Jack Smith put together this huge report to Tanya Chutkan saying, this is what I will try. And then after the election, we said, okay, let's dismiss this now. No. Let Donald Trump be the one who defines himself by dismissing this on his term. Don't you do it, Merrick Garland.
But he did it, obeying in advance.
He did it.
And his lack of priority, his lack of urgency is just as detrimental to this case as Trump's ability and his attorney's ability to delay. It's the same thing on the other side.
Absolutely.
Man.
If you don't act, these bad things, these horrifically terrible things will happen.
It's hard for me to think that a guy like Merrick Garland and folks in those positions, that they didn't know that, Jim. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
If they knew it, that's the point that makes it even worse. Come back with us, James Santelle, former U.S. Attorney, Merrick Garland. I think, yes, worst AG ever. 855-752-4842. back to the Dom Salvia Show. Happy days to us all. You can be a part. 855-752-4842. 855-755 Civic. Our friend James Santelle, former U.S. Attorney, host of Amicus, a law review, joining me at the table today. Just PS on the board. You folks on the lines and on the text. It's the same number, 855-75 Civic. So I'm not a fan of Garland. I mean, it seems like a nice guy, but I don't know what the hell he was doing. In some ways, I think I'm not going to say he was, part of the conspiracy, quote unquote, but as mentioned, the lack of urgency, right, for Barr. They know when the statutes of limitations run out. They know the dates. They know the deal. These are professionals, prosecutors, judges, so on and so forth. They knew what was happening. I can't imagine this just crept up on them. Right. Oh, we ran out of time, man. Who knows? I mean, so if they were, in my mind, purposefully slow walking this thing.
Right.
Is that possible? Is that something? Because you could have gone after it immediately. Bang, bang, bang. Right. Got ahead of it in front of the election. Right. Would have any of those kinds of issues. Right. It was very evident, at least on the television, what was going on. People were attacking it. Well, who motivated that? Who was behind that? Who made the calls? With the digital world we got now, you can find out everything. Right.
You could have called Jack Smith back from overseas doing his prosecution of war criminals early. You didn't necessarily have to make him special counsel. You just simply hire him, put him in a position, which is another issue, which I think for a while we're going special counsel happy too. Yeah. Remember, we've got special counsels for Mike Pence, we've got special counsels for Joe Biden, and we're doing that. Why? Because we want to send a message to America that the Department of Justice, which apparently can't do those investigations, what is that message that you're sending, Mr. Attorney General? Right? You're sending this message that somehow we've got to have somebody who's arm's length from us, who is not going to be supervised by me, and that again is because the American public really doesn't trust the Department of Justice. You're confirming that view when you do that very thing. Not only delaying it, but also sending that related message that the line prosecutors, there are thousands of them. They're spectacular. They know what the elements of the offenses are, of conspiracy and of the obstruction statutes, all those kinds of things.
This is what I'm saying. So if there's immense capability for those folks that are there, then these are career folks for the most part, man. They're down for law and order. That's why they get into the
know
deal.
How investigations work.
These aren't a bunch of drug dealing hippies, man. You know what I'm saying? Exactly. You talk about justice and the FBI and these different agencies that the Republicans are all mad about. Well, if you stop your criming, maybe they wouldn't be poking their head around. But that aside, if you acknowledge that these are professionals and efficient and active prosecutors, then how do you explain the slow walking? How do you explain the delay? Other than they didn't want to do it. They don't want to go after the executive branch. They didn't want to, set a precedent, whatever their justification is. It doesn't matter because I don't buy it.
Because somehow you think, and again, I don't buy this either, but I think this is what's going on in Merrick Garland's mind early on. I want to turn the page on what Bill Barr did. I want to make clear that we are not animated by politics or partisan views, and therefore, again, not only am I going to point out these special counsels, but let's just see how this plays out. And I don't want to pounce right away upon the former president because that would look as if I'm retributive here.
What really looked bad was all those people attacking the Capitol and Trump saying, go down there and fight like hell. You're not going to country anymore. That looked kind of bad. That was bad. I mean, that was bad. I thought that was bad. I think that was something that would be bad.
And you have to, again, to the extent that this is all about restoring the reputation of the Department of Justice, you have to do it by saying, yes, this is what the Department of Justice is going to do. And yes, I will take the heat as the Attorney General for prosecuting Donald Trump as a private citizen. I will take the heat for the people inside the criminal division, the national security division, the civil division, all the ENRD, all tax, everybody. I will take the heat for what we do because the Department of Justice is uniquely positioned to do these kinds of things. I supervise the FBI, which is another important part of this as well. I have trust in them as well to do, not perfectly, to do their job well. You send that message by doing the job that you are supposed to do, not by cowering to the concern. Again, you talk about Timothy Snyder, right? Obeying in advance. Concern about how this is going to play out among the American population who looks at me and says, well, he's just another Bill Barr. No, you're not. If you're pursuing the investigations timely, you're doing them according to what the law requires, and you return indictments that are premised upon probable cause, that's what we expected you to do.
To go into an investigation or prosecution for political reasons is wrong,
Right,
and to avoid them for political reasons is also wrong.
Right. And you do that by a couple of ways. Number one is you present things to the grand jury. It's 26 people, right? And they're the ones who are supposed to be looking at all this. And then afterwards, you can issue your press releases. And you can even as Jack Smith did so expertly throughout these cases, you can issue documents, your motions, your memorandums to the judges in which you set forth your case and you footnote them just like Mueller did, right? And you say, this is how we know these things. And you are justified in doing so.
James Santelle, former U.S. Attorney. Jim, just another minute or so left in this segment, and we'll get into Judge Merchan at the top of the next hour. Is it lack of spine and lack of leadership? If it's not corruption and it's not incompetence, is it the lack of will or the lack of leadership? I mean, how would you describe it in the last 60 seconds?
I would say it's probably the second, leadership with a small L. This is a man, again, he was in the Department of Justice a long time ago, so he knows it. He's not this is not a complete new person to this, but it's a lack of appreciation of what the Department of Justice is all about, I think. And maybe his time on the bench clouded that a bit. Not that he didn't see prosecutors all the time, but internal to the Department of Justice, that sense of commitment, that's the important thing that I suspect he lacked.
We don't lack wisdom here. James Santelle, former U.S. Attorney, going to stick around for another hour. Folks, you can join us as well. 855-752-4842. As mentioned, Judge Merchan, he's going to sentence Donald Trump. It's going to be great. Oh, maybe not. Come back with us.
It's the Lion Jail. It's the Lions at your bell. Don't bother and try and fight. It's only a few
Broadcasting across the state of Wisconsin on the Civic Media Radio Network and around the world on the Civic Media app. This is the Dom Salvia Show. And now, here's your host, Dom Salvia.
And welcome to the Dom Salvia Show. I am your host, Dom Salvia. Happy Friday to us all, the first Friday of 2025. And I'm jazzed as hell to be sharing it with my friend James Santelle, former U.S. Attorney, host of Amicus, a law review right here on the Civic Media Radio Network. Just PS is on the board. You folks can join us as well, 855-752-4842. All right, let's move away from the Merrick Garland conversation because now we got the Reuters article here telling us, Jim, Trump must be sentenced in criminal case. Yes. Oh, wait, but does not face jail. Huh? Let me just read, if you'll indulge me momentarily. Jim, Trump must be sentenced on January 10th, a week from today, Jim.
1 week from today.
We're going to do this again next week, right?
We are.
All right. We'll celebrate.
Right.
We'll celebrate the conviction and the sentencing.
The result of which we apparently already know, but right.
Man. Yeah, apparently we already know. He'll be sentenced in the criminal case in which he was convicted on charges, 34 of them.
In May of this year, by the way.
In May, that's a long time ago.
A long time ago.
May of last year.
Of last year, right? I'm sorry.
Right.
Yes, last year, 2024.
Convicted on charges involving hush money paid to a porn star. Ooh. You know, when it put it like that, it hardly seems like election interference because that's why he did it. He did it at the tail end of 2016's election to keep people's
to try
mouth
to
shut.
deceive the American public from knowing who he really was. That was to his credit. That was Alvin Bragg's position at trial, that this was not just about salacious sex and trying to hide this from your wife. This was an attempt, again, to undermine the election. And we saw more of that down the road. And again, he was successful. Why? Because a jury, let's remember this as well, 12 people, admittedly Manhattanites and people of his peers, found him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt unanimously. Those are significant things. 34 counts, violations of New York law.
Come on, man. He was cutting the checks from the White House. He was doing it. There was no denying that he was doing it. A little bit more here from Reuters. Justice Juan Merchan said he denied Trump's motion to dismiss the case due to his presidential election victory. Right. The judge said the Republican president-elect may appear for sentencing, which will take place just 10 days before his inauguration. He can appear either in person or virtually. Oh, isn't that very nice of you? Merchan wrote that a sentence of, quote, unconditional discharge, meaning no custody, no monetary fine, no probation, would be the most viable solution. Now, I'm no lawyer here, Jim. I've been on the other side of this, and I've never gotten, as a result of any charges against me, an unconditional discharge with no custody, no monetary fine, no probation. How is that a viable solution? How is that a solution at all? Hell, how is that a sentence?
I have been outraged from the start here since July 11th. Remember, on July 11th, right before the Republicans were in Milwaukee for their convention, Juan Merchan had scheduled a hearing. And that was for sentencing. Now, admittedly, okay, he's got some basis for doing this. He wanted to make certain that crazy Supreme Court case did not implicate anything related to the trial. He could have argued this and gotten the memorandums, as he did, from the players and all this, the parties and all this. And he then decided, we'll do this in September. In September, he delays it into November. In November, he basically takes it off the calendar completely. So, number one, why the delay on all this? In a situation where it's very clear, as he ultimately found just a few days ago, no connection. There's nothing to suggest that this private person at the time is enabled to benefit from immunities from the Supreme Court. So he gets that right. And he also then gets it right that, yes, just because you're becoming the president doesn't mean you have to dismiss this case.
Right.
This is not official. You're not doing this in your official capacity. He gets all of this right. He gets it right months after he should have gotten it right. And then to your point. And so I celebrate the fact that he is going to sentence Donald Trump because that's what every other defendant in America suffers. When you're convicted, ultimately after post-trial motions, you are sentenced. And so to that extent, the process of due process here, and the due process of law is followed. And then there's the second point.
What's
right?
it? Which is what?
The second point is the merits of what he's now doing, right? And so we're saying that this
the actual
is
sentencing.
Absolutely. What is wrong? What is wrong with imposing a sentence of some jail time, a fine of, I don't know, $100,000, maybe some term of probation, and then what you can do is just this. We've talked about this in the past. I am now going to stay the imposition. I'm going to suspend that. I'm going to close out my file, and you can appeal all you want during the next 4 years. It's not going to be imposed at any time. It's not going to interrupt your presidency. I'm going to impose that sentence upon you that gives the American people some sense of, yes, indeed, there's justice being done here. And then when you are done with your presidency in 2029, if the appeal and all that is completed, then at that time, the New York authorities will show up at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and say, it is now time, sir, for you to serve your fill in the blank. 30 days, 60 days. You've got to now pay your fine. You've got to be supervised. You can stay all of that, but close out the case, sentence him to something that's meaningful in response to what he did, which was horrific, not just a hush money case, violating false statements, fraudulent claims here, undermining the election itself. Respond in a way that every other defendant, admittedly not facing these kinds of charges, would have to respond to this, and then simply suspend it for 4 years. That's justice, and it would accomplish what he's attempting to do here. I don't understand the sentence that basically gives him a pass now going forward. Another pass.
A sentence of unconditional discharge sounds like a problem to me. James Santelle joining me, 855-752-4842. A little bit more from the Reuters reporting on this breaking news today. In denying Trump's motion to dismiss, Michon said the prosecution over decidedly personal acts of falsifying business records poses no danger of intrusion on the authority and function of the executive branch. No doubt. Now, according to Reuters, falsifying business records is punishable by up to 4 years in prison, but incarceration is not required. Before his election victory, legal experts said it was unlikely Trump would be locked up due to his lack of a criminal history and advanced age, but that a prison sentence was not impossible. Not impossible.
Or a limited term in custody, right? You can do all kinds of things.
Something.
Right?
But a
fine, perhaps?
Well,
right?
Definitely a fine. Come on, man. 34 felony counts, yo. 34. You know, if I go in and book my bar expenses marketing, and the man audits me, I'd probably be in trouble for that, right? Would I get an unconditional discharge? Oh, sorry, Mr. Salvia, very important now.
Yeah, apparently, if you get a very, very big job, you can. And here's the other thing I think about, again, taking us a little bit different direction. It's a fellow named Eric Adams, who's the mayor of that city right now.
New York,
we saw him recently, right? He's also facing felony charges for bribery and other times of corruption in the federal court. Boy, if I were his counsel, I would say, you know what? My client also has an extraordinarily important job. Arguably, maybe not quite as important as the presidency, but the mayor of the city of New York. He can't be bothered with these kinds of things.
No.
Let's get this all resolved. Let's invoke what the Chief Justice said is you can't be tampering with the prerogative of somebody who's got this important job. I would be raising that disposition in the Supreme Court and now this sentencing to say, you know what, Mr. Federal Judge, before whom Eric Adams is appearing, I would like a similar deal. I like a similar arrangement here. And again, it won't happen. It will not happen. But that's the message.
Hell, maybe Adams should just run for president.
Right. And it's,
right? Everybody's running for president to get away from the prosecution.
Exactly. Just be a viable candidate, and you invoke this
viable,
process
not viable.
here.
It doesn't matter.
Right,
Run
right,
him.
right.
855-752-4842. 4842-855-75 Civic. Let's get a couple of the callers in. Looks like we have Cindy from Appleton. You will be next. Welcome, Cindy. What do you got for us?
Well, I know you guys are kind of chuckling about this, but isn't this setting a terrible precedent?
Yes!
Wait.
We got to laugh, Cindy, otherwise we're going to be sobbing.
It is laughter through the crying. Yes, yeah, absolutely, Cindy. Yeah. It's a terrible precedent, and again, not the Eric Adams reference is not completely absurd, frankly.
Yeah, right.
And others out there who may now look at this again, future presidents beyond Donald Trump, looking at all this and saying, "Hands off! I can not only do what I want to do under the Supreme Court decision, but beyond that, if I get in some kind of state trouble out there, that too, I'm a very busy guy or woman down the road. I can't be bothered with." That's the precedent, Cindy, you're talking about. It's terrible. It's terrible.
Well, that sucks. 855-752-4842. Matt from Middleton. When you put it like that, Jim, it sounds really bad. Hey, Matt, welcome. What do you got for us?
Hey, guys. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I just wanted to bring up this silent enemy that I think could be a unifying subject if Democrats took a hold of it. I think we could get some MAGA support even if they would, do some thinking and actually figure out what's going on. It's these private equity firms in Wall Street. I had a friend that worked at Ace Hardware, and they got bought out by one of these firms, and everything went to shit. And they own pretty much everything. They're behind.
Thanks for the call, Matt. Appreciate it. Private equity firms, when you see these companies coming in, and this is not new, right? This has been going on as long as there have been businesses, one way, shape, or form. These things happen. But you come in, you see a cash cow, you see a good company making money, doing a thing. You pay for it, then you restructure everything, suck as much money as you possibly can out, sell off whatever assets you can, cash out in first, second, third, fourth quarter if you can, whatever it takes. And then at the end of it all, when there's nothing left, you can't strike a match, so you just fire everybody. And then what? Declare bankruptcy? I mean, it's
right.
There's a lot of that.
And you're done with the process. And I thought maybe going down this road as well, depending upon how you do that. Again, a lot of that, what you just described, is unfortunately legal. It's unfair. It's indecent. It's immoral, I would offer. But if you're also doing that in a way that's contrary to state and federal law, all kinds of things you've got to comply with.
Yeah.
There, too, this is why administrations and elections make differences. If you are telling your Department of Justice that, hey, hands off those private equity firms. Don't look at them. Work on other things. Work on, well, I don't know what those would be. I was about to say the environment. That's not what your focus is going to be, right? Not education, apparently not that either, right? Farms, well, I don't know. But if you basically commission your attorney general and the criminal division there to say, you know what, we're not going to focus on that a whole lot, that too can be another injustice by virtue of not setting that as a priority. And I thought that's kind of where Matt was going with it. Maybe it was in a different direction.
Was it Mitt Romney, creative destruction? I mean, didn't he do something along those lines, coming in and you got to wind them down, Jim, you got to wind them down.
Right.
Folks, you're listening to the Dom Salvia Show. That's James Santelle, former U.S. Attorney, host of Amicus, a law review. We got another 45 minutes to join, or for you to join us, 855-75-CIVIC. Come back with us. We have some updates. Rudy Giuliani, man. He's also found guilty, but he's not giving up the goods.
Right, he is in court today.
We'll come back with us, James Santelle and Jess PS and Dom. Welcome back to the Dom Salvia Show, 855-752-4842. James Santelle, Just BS, hanging out with you on the first Friday of 2025. The topic of the moment, we'll move on to other topics as well. Donald Trump to be sentenced a week from today, January 10th. But unfortunately, Judge Juan Merchan is showing his cards a little bit, and he's going to write a sentence of unconditional discharge, meaning no custody, no monetary fine, nor probation.
So nothing?
Nothing, right?
I'm going to sentence you to nothing.
Nothing, right?
Is that really a sentence?
Right. And it also underscores.
Can how do you serve that sentence?
There's also something peculiar about scheduling a sentencing hearing where basically the idea is prosecutions can speak. The defendant is called your right of allocution. You can stand up and tell me, Mr. Trump, what it is you think I should do. Your attorneys can do that. That's what the sentencing hearing is. And then the suspense, of course, is what is the judge going to do with all that? So today, in scheduling that proceeding, the judge has already told everybody what he's going to do. Juan, what's going on here?
What's going on with Juan, man?
What is that? Again, glad that you're bringing this to an end before the presidency of Donald Trump begins.
Have you experienced this before?
I have never. Plainly, there are sentencings that are interrupted. For example, we got witnesses. We go down this road. I've spoken. You get the defense side speaks, and the judge says, "You know what? We need more time for witnesses." And that happens all the time. But the notion that the judge, before the sentencing itself, scheduled for a week from today, announces what he's going to do at the end of the sentencing, scheduled for a week from today, that's peculiar. I don't know New York law, but it's just a small footnote to an otherwise very peculiar last 6 months in the processing of all this. Also, again, I'm loath to predict things, but Donald Trump's been very aggressive about all this. Don't be surprised if his attorneys file something to stay or to postpone the sentencing, run up to a court of appeals and say, don't do this at all. Donald Trump wants nothing more than this just to die on the vine, right? Don't be surprised if there are some petitions filed today, Monday, asking an appeals court to tell Juan Merchan not to conduct this proceeding. So hopefully they would deny that, shut that down. But we may not have heard the end of, even though he's getting a non-sentence here. He is, let's face it, he is again talking about encouraged by the lack of response to him. Why wouldn't you do that? Why not take one more shot here? And it's been successful in postponing this.
And your followers are paying your legal bills anyway. I mean,
right? Why not do that?
OPM, baby,
right?
It doesn't matter.
Exactly. Right.
855-752-4842. Len from Madison chimes in. A little quote, "Everyone is equal under the law," unquote. Then Len goes on to say, "Propaganda BS." And Len, man, you're right. If there's anything to gain from this, we're going to look on the bright side. Can we say that there is no equality under law? Given these circumstances, and look at what Donald Trump has done, the convictions that he's had, from the way he's been able to avoid the things, the way he's used the Justice Department when he was in control, the ways he's used his attorneys to delay. He's been convicted. And now we have this judge who's going to go along basically with a sentence of unconditional discharge, a sentence of nothing. It seems to me that everyone is not equal under the law, Jim.
How do you teach civics in America in 2025?
Do we teach civics in
we
America
should be
anymore,
teaching civics in America if we are, or even teaching fundamental notions of sort of how the process should work in America, right? That if you engage in criminal conduct, you'll get charged with it. You'll get before a jury at some point. You can argue your case. You're presumed innocent, but if that jury decides that you're guilty, you get sentenced for it. And frankly, things that you do not like will happen to you. That can include a fine. That include some incarceration. How do you send that message to, frankly, teenagers and young adults and middle-aged people and old people in America? You take a look once again at those stunning dissents that were issued by Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan and Ketanji Brown Jackson. No one is above the law. Apparently not. That's what they said. They've got a loaded gun now in the West Wing and the Oval Office. It appears from what the Supreme Court has said, and it's certainly taken its life now today as well, that that notion that no one is above the law. That's actually also how the Mueller report concludes. That's the last thing that Bob Mueller says in that hundreds of pages of report. No one is above the law. I wonder what Bob Mueller is thinking today. It appears that that's simply, at least for one person in America, that isn't the case. I wonder, too, about other defendants out there who are looking at this and saying, can my attorneys argue that same thing? Do I have some of the same merits here? Well, I'm not going to be the president of the United States of America.
But that's the whole point.
Right.
Just because you're going to be, or whatever the case is, you're not now. When you did the crimes, you weren't in office, and you were in office. It was because it kind of
private citizen.
He was a private citizen. Then he continued the crimes. He was cutting checks with his signature on from the Oval Office, man. So that 34 counts, and I think that's the thing. So no, justice is not equal to Len's from Madison's point. There's folks right now in the state of New York, I guarantee it, that have these kind of charges against them. And they're not going to get this kind of result. They're not going to get an unconditional discharge, right?
All kinds of cases in the federal system. It's 18 U.S.C. 1001, right? It's false statements. Use that statute all the time. Prosecutors in virtually every single district in America. Defendants who are identified making false statements in connection with government issues, representations, all kinds of fraud. That happens all the time. They don't get this kind of disposition.
Like saying you're not using drugs when you fill out a form to get a gun.
That's one of them, right? But and many other situations across the board, and all kinds of you make an application for government monies, and you swear under penalty of perjury that you are who you are, and your economic status is as it is.
Is that part of the civil case? That was against him in the state of New York as well, right? He was changing the value of his assets based on whether or not it was an insurance claim or based on whether or not it was a tax issue.
This is Letitia James' case. This is the Attorney General, right? And that's, again, the Court of Appeals right now. And so that, too, you hope that the Court of Appeals will uphold that determination by Judge Engeron there. All of these kinds of things, you've got to think beyond just the particular defendant here. You want to impose a sentence, whether it's civil or criminal, that responds to that conduct. But you're also always thinking about the next case. And the messages you're sending to America, the population of constituents, it is a troubling time in America for that kind of messaging.
I think it's a time of clarity, because perhaps the rich and the powerful have always had this leg up on the rest of us. And maybe the rest of us ought to get off our asses and do something about it. Folks, this is the Dom Salvia Show. James Santelle coming back for another 30 minutes. You as well, 855-752-4842. Welcome back to the Dom Salvia Show. Happy Friday to us all. James Santelle, former U.S. Attorney, host of Amicus, a law review on Saturdays right here on the Civic Media Radio Network, 9 to 11 a.m. Joining me for the next 30 minutes. Just PS on the board. You folks on the phone lines and the text lines, lighten them up. We had a caller and bad connection. I finished off the last segment. This is multi-tiered. We got to do something. We got to get off our asses and do something. And she was asking, okay, what do we do?
What do we do?
That's a great question, caller. Jim, what do we do?
What do we do? Preface this by saying we
Susan from McFarland, thank you.
Oh, wonderful. We never, ever advocate for violence. We want no one hurt. We want no property destruction.
But will it be wild?
But it can be wild, right? With a small W. And this is what we've been moaning recently. Again, not to make this broader than it really is, but you know what's going on in South Korea right now? People are really upset about even as late as today, right? They're going to arrest the former president, and they were rebuffed by the security guards there. But people in the streets about that. Before the Gaza war, Israelites, the people of the Israeli citizenry was in the streets. They were upset about, again, changes in their government that would have minimized the role of the courts in there.
Yeah.
The United States Supreme Court on July 1 of last year issued this major decision that amended the Constitution and said, you know what, our presidents are immune. And that's what gives rise to all these things in many ways that we're talking about right now, is somebody who is in the presidency, are they above the law? I looked outside and I did not see Americans taking to the streets, nor even today or even next Friday, when all these basically are all done. By next Friday, effectively, all those criminal cases against Donald Trump will effectively be done. Various of them are already done, but we can put an end to all of this. Are Americans going to take to the streets, frankly, whether it's on January 20th or before then or after then, and say, you know what? Something has gone dramatically wrong here. And we insist, and you go to the United States Supreme Court. Again, no violence, but you walk up and down First Street there, and in front of the Capitol, in front of the Supreme Court building, you go into the streets of cities in Wisconsin and Milwaukee and Stevens Point and Eau Claire and Green Bay and everywhere around the state, and you protest these kinds of things, right? I don't know that we have that same resolve that people in other countries who are responding in ways, they're not responding to issues about education and environment. They're responding to the rule of law being broken in their nation. They're saying we're not putting up with it. And in South Korea, we know what happened. They actually ensured that legislatures could get into the National Assembly so that they could vote to stop martial law from being imposed. Wow, power of the people, right? Are we ready to do that here in America? Again, no violence, but protesting in a way that sends a message to all of us, including the world, that we are upset about this as well.
But are we?
Well,
Jim?
that's the question that I ask,
I mean?
right?
Are we?
And are we sufficiently, again, in the wake of what we just did in early November of this year? It's easy to say, where do you get district attorneys? Where do they come from? Where do attorneys general come from? Where do, frankly, directors of the FBI come from? They all come ultimately from voting, right? And we made a major decision in early November about the future of our nation when we decided that Donald Trump would be our next president, because that affects not only who our attorney general is, who our director of the FBI is, director of the ATF. He will be appointing U.S. attorneys, 92 of them in the coming weeks or so, federal judges coming up, district court judges, appellate court judges. Voting is the key to everything. And if there are populations, we know there are populations out there that did not come up to the bar and did not vote in November.
Regularly,
right, exactly.
Folks don't. Yeah.
And if you're upset today, this is what you get. This is what you get. And again, it's easy to say that. That's 20/20 hindsight. But again, for the future, we've got an election coming up, believe it or not, in less than 2 years. It's called the midterms. We're not going to be replacing a president here. But
hell, Jim, we got an election coming up in a couple of months.
In the state of Wisconsin, right, for the Supreme Court. It's going to change, depending upon what happens here, the balance of priorities. And I'm not even going to say politics. We're going to balance of priorities.
Yeah,
right?
That's a good
exactly.
point. Yeah.
And if you're not voting in that, then again, Dom, you'll always take those phone calls from your good listeners, but your credibility drops dramatically if you're not out there doing those kinds of things, exercising your right to define your government and being hopping mad when it doesn't happen. Not violent, not in any way threatening anybody. That's not America. We condemn all of that which has happened recently. But this notion of First Amendment right to protest, to be more vocal than we have been, where are we today? Are we really upset about what's going to happen in a week from today? I suspect not.
James Santelle, former U.S. attorney, host Amicus, a law review on Saturdays, 9 to 11 a.m. It's so to Susan's point though, it's engagement, and I think if you see what's going on in South Korea, they went to go pick up because they impeached the initial president. The guy that put out the
military rule, basically, right, exactly, right.
They impeached him. Then they impeached the prime minister,
the second in command. He's also been impeached
too,
because he wasn't putting people on the court that review the impeachment of the president, right? And they said, no, we're not going to tolerate that either. Earlier today, an attempt to go and arrest who's at his home, the former president here, that's rebuffed by apparently his security.
Rebuffed. So they wouldn't let. So the former president who was impeached for instilling martial law unconstitutionally in South Korea,
he's holed up in his private residence,
and
now,
they wouldn't.
Right?
They didn't go in guns blazing, I guess, right? Because
they decided not to engage in violence, and they backed off. But the arrest warrant continues. I understand it through Monday of next week.
They don't know about the Branch Davidians. I mean, they can go get those folks, man. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
All right. So, but here, I guess here's my point with that observation. The democracy in South Korea is still very young.
It is.
They're still very hungry. The memories of the past are very fresh.
Absolutely.
There. For us, man, we're the greatest country in the world.
We can't
it's a big
imagine.
Deal. I got stuff to do. The Packers are playing the Bears on Sunday. I mean,
the United States will be here forever. We cannot imagine that there will not always be a United States Congress selecting a Speaker of the House of Representatives and swearing in a president.
Fall, man.
Right? 320
Spain,
years.
Persia. I mean, go over the history of the world, man.
Right.
Everything eventually falls. And why is that? Besides the lead and the incest. You know what I'm saying? It is the lack.
In the pipes. Right?
Come on. Right. The Romans, you know what I'm saying? Why is that? Why I think just, ostensibly, it's the lack of engagement,
right?
Man.
And ultimately, government interpreted very broadly. Some of these governments, obviously, led by the most extreme dictators in the world, but some basic faults there, some basic incapacities to continue to provide the things that the group of constituents, your citizenry, your residents, the people who you are responsible for, not providing what they need, and ultimately it does disintegrate. Obviously, you make reference to Rome, many other empires out there. It's much debated, but a lot of historians say it's 320 years is the average. Well, we're coming up on about 250 right now. And again, you want to keep this going beyond 320 years, you've got to be out there, you've got to be voting sensibly, and you need to let people know right now that you're not happy with things as they're going on. We are going to be holding on here after January 20th to see what else happens in America. And if you're not satisfied with your government, you need to let your representatives know that, and you need to do those things that you are entitled to do as Americans under the Constitution.
Well, so far, man, but, if some of the reporting, and you've seen, some of the mega extremists are suggesting that, when Trump gets in, declare some sort of martial law.
Right,
declare, hey, we got a terrorism problem. We got a border problem. We got something that, I'm going to declare martial law an emergency and take over powers and limit your ability to speak out against your government, limit your ability to protest, to gather in mass, and limit that. I mean, those are the kinds of things that I think it's like a slow burn, man. It's sooner or later someone's going to break it, and this is very concerning for me, Jim. Because even the megas, I mean, find it very difficult to believe that Donald Trump will be able to do all the things he wants to do. And if he does do some of these things, I think the megas, to their fault, they're going to be impacted negatively by some of these policies. And they're not, if this goes down and something like that happens and Trump declares, and I'm not saying that there wouldn't be a reason for some way, somehow, for an administration to declare an emergency. Certainly that can happen. But just to willy-nilly do it for political purpose?
Because you don't like the city of
for
Chicago.
efficiency's sake,
right?
you know what I mean?
And so we're
to
gonna send
work
troops.
around democracy.
Right.
That's certainly very concerning. And those that would have a problem, even Trump supporters, and eventually some Trump supporters will become Trump not supporters. You know, if you're in that, sooner or later you're cast aside. Well, we see with the H-1B visa conversation right now is already split megas to some degree. Right. It's going to be to the point where some of those folks, even those supporters, maybe they'll come around and say, you know, this is not what you promised.
This is not what I voted for.
This is not what we want. This is not the rule of law and all those things. But man, what do we have to go to get there?
Right. And that's the concern. And as you describe this, of course, the images of violence in our streets, that's the concern. And that's not the way that's not what we bargained for. That's not what we voted for. Regardless of how it is you voted in November, you've got to take a look at this. You've got to be, and here's the other piece of it. I mentioned once a broadcast when I'm here with you on Fridays, it's that critical thinking. You call upon everybody to say, wait a minute, I've got to stand back and say, is this normal? And be able to talk with my friends and even the people who disagree with me and say, you know what? No, there's no reason to invade the city of Chicago or Detroit because you think that their principles of the mayor or other people there are just anathema to America. That's too far, right? And you've got to be able to have those conversations and respond in a way that says, Mr. President, no, we're not going to let you do that. And again, we've got a Congress Day. We talked a lot about it. They are supposed to be our representatives, right? So you write letters, you go to Washington, D.C., and you say, you know what? I am very upset with you, the way you're voting. That's representative democracy. That's a republic that was created 240 years ago.
855-752-4842. You know, Jim, my parenting skills are limited, essentially, and can be summarized in a couple of phrases that I've told my kids over and over and still tell them now. And I can't say it entirely on the radio, but since we're limited by the FCC, don't crap the bed, and don't take crap from anybody.
Right.
That's it. Those are Dom's rules. You know, things are going to happen. It'll be tough, ups and downs, strikes and gutters. You know what I'm saying? Don't crap the bed, and don't take crap from anybody. And it kind of feels like we're taking crap from people right now. It kind of feels like, you know, that it's getting shoved in our face. That the reason that we have the law and order and the rights of the individuals. So, you know, your rights stop at my nose, your fist and my nose, right? There's a limitation, and there's a respect for people, and that's why we have laws. You cannot do these things. And when you engage in unlawful behavior, be it against the state of New York, be it against a personal a rape against a person. Fraud against the state of New York, fraud against your supporters, those kinds of things. Well, there's damages there, man. And when we as a country, because this is ultimately, Jim, reflection of us, man.
It is,
isn't it? I mean,
absolutely.
And it's hard for me to see that reflection, man.
Right. It is.
It is hard to deal with.
Right. It is plainly here in the United States of America. I have a few friends who are overseas as well who also look to us and say, what are you doing here? Again, as much as the entire world is sort of gripped in many places, right? Venezuela.
This is a great point. Right? We're not the only ones going through these kinds of issues.
Right? Nicolas Maduro right now plainly should not be president there. And that election was indeed stolen. The one instance where maybe that happens.
In Venezuela.
Exactly, right? You've got those kinds of instances happening around the world. But there again, how does the international community respond? Again, not successfully, at least up to this point. They say, you know what, this is an invalid election and he should not be in that position. Are we going to again come forward and say not that this election was stolen? We need to be have some integrity when it comes to our assessment of things.
If the evidence would point to that, I'd be happy to go down that road.
Let's file the 60 lawsuits tomorrow, right? Right, and suffer the consequences of however that plays out. But that's the concern, is that is there pushing going on right now, which is kind of another way of articulating your second rule there in a way that has not been fair to everybody and really not a part of the history of our nation.
Folks, this is the Dom Salvia Show. It is the first Friday of 2025, and I can't imagine a better way of breaking it in with my friend James Santelle, Just PS on the board. We have one last segment. If you got something to say, hit us up right now. Text or call 855-752-4842. Salvia Show, last segment of the day. So if you have something to say, hit us up, talk or text 855-752-4842. James at Santelle sticking around. Just P.S. Couple of you folks on the socials. Bruce says, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. Nice, man. I like that.
Network, Peter Finch, right?
Let's see. PJ, no, we're not going to take to the streets. It's too damn cold outside at the moment. Well,
Bundle up, PJ.
Right. April and May are just fine in Washington, D.C.
Right.
It was warm. The cherry blossom trees are blossoming. It's a good time to be there.
Someone from the 262 of the WAUK. Hey, guys, there is a large march by the people in D.C. in 2 weeks. People need to be aware. Many other big cities having them as well spread the word.
That's Dennis from Waukesha.
All right, Dennis. Good to know. I wonder if we're going to have anything. We should start something. We should do something. Let people know. I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. Jim, we move on to one final topic of the day.
Did you a little matter?
This terrible terrorist, domestic terrorism in New Orleans. Lots we can say about that. But apparently, Ryan Walters, so this guy's the Oklahoma State superintendent, he's got it all figured out.
Decided to come back in the news.
Well, never let a good tragedy go to waste if you can, increase your clicks. So we're not giving out the socials, but we will play for you Ryan Walters. Again, this is the Oklahoma State superintendent. What he has to say about schools and terrorist training camps. Let's play the piece, please.
You have schools that are teaching kids to hate their country.
What?
That this country is evil. You have the teachers' unions pushing this on our kid. The radical left wants people to hate this country. They've completely destroyed the integrity of the FBI by making them more concerned about DEI than about protecting Americans. It's a major part of this. And look, this is a real uncomfortable truth. I know the left is going to lose their mind, but listen, we cannot allow our schools to become terrorist training camps. We cannot allow our schools to teach our kids to hate this country. We cannot allow our kids to teach that this is an evil country. That's why we are getting back to the basics here in Oklahoma to make sure that our kids love this country, understand American values, understand the role that the Constitution, the Bible, the Declaration of Independence played in American history, because we want patriots. And that's got to be the focus of our schools.
The Bibles are back in the schools, according to him, or should be there. He's been advocating that for weeks, if not months out there. Again, contrary to Supreme Court rules and laws on all these kinds of things. He talks about the Constitution and upholding it and investing in our future generations and our respect for the Constitution. Constitution specifically says on that issue and many others, the government makes no laws establishing religion. Mr. Superintendent, and you've got it just plain wrong.
You think as the guy who is the superintendent of the schools would know that,
right? Mm-hmm. And secondarily, and maybe at the first level, of course, this reference to terrorist camps.
Terrorist training camps.
Those teachers' unions, man, they're the big problem.
I would call upon anyone to identify any school teacher in America today. We've varying levels of quality, I know, and competence and even experience, but every single teacher who's there because she or he wants to be there, these are not terrorist camps. And again, how offensive to the Oklahoma schools, right? And students and teachers and principals who are there to educate. Again, here's a situation where whatever the process is for him, he should be removed from that position. These statements alone are so violative of what we do in education and what should happen, not just in Oklahoma, but around the country. Using, once again, this latest horrific instance, again, almost certainly, again, domestic terrorism here, equating that with education in America?
Well, what do you make of his statement that the thing that should be first and foremost in our public schools should be making patriots?
Right.
That it shouldn't be
critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Critical thinking. It shouldn't be developing well-rounded humans or citizens, but patriots.
Citizens who are able to look at government as we have done today and say, you know what, I agree with some things, I disagree with other things. I've got the capacity to say that out loud.
And I have the right to say that out loud.
And I have a right to make changes, right? That's patriotism. Patriotism is not simply blind allegiance to a government or officials because they say something and therefore I believe it. No, he's got it just plain wrong. And again, how offensive! How offensive
so
to
bad.
we 14 people killed, many other injured in New Orleans. A community plainly victimized by this lady. How offensive to New Orleans and all the people, all Americans also who look at this with tragic eyes and cry tears that are legitimate. How offensive, Mr. Superintendent, that you would equate somehow that tragic event with something that's not going on in your schools. It just plain isn't.
It's the teachers union's fault. I mean, that's what he's saying. Teachers union pushing our kids. The radical left wants people to hate this country. Well, no, that's not the case at all. But let me ask you this, Mr. Superintendent. Is slavery evil? Yes or no? I would assume he would say yes. Well, this country engaged in slavery longer than most. Right. Is that an evil act? Is doing an evil act, does that make one evil?
And use the Bible as justification for a very long time.
Right. So it's not that, we're saying this country is evil, but we're being honest about our history.
And
shouldn't we be?
And we teach that history, so heaven forbid we don't do those kinds of things again, right?
That's the point.
Right. So we don't make the same mistakes. We don't try to obliterate history. Just in the break, you and I were talking about Huckleberry Finn, right?
Yeah.
This great Mark Twain, and the notion that now it's on the book burning lists of places around the country. No, we want to hear about everything good, bad, and indifferent that happened inside our nation's history.
Read all the banned books. James Santelle, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I will see you next Friday after, perhaps, or during the sentencing unconditional discharge of the former soon-to-be next president. Thank you, Jess P.S. Folks, thank you for listening. Stick around. Pete Schwab, Nightlight, coming up next. See you on Monday.